which position would you like to stand? Affirmative, opponent, both? You may indicate so right now.
Hisham, do you have a preference?
I'll take the negative.
Okay, so you'll be the opponent. And the person who will go first is Toastmaster Matthew.
Madam Moderator, if
Go
I
ahead.
may.
Go ahead.
I believe the first speaker just said that in discussion with Godfrey, the person who goes first is actually allowed to just choose whether they will affirm or whether they will be opposed. So I'm not so sure if asking both persons now whether they want to be affirmative or to oppose is in keeping with that.
The person who will be speaking first is Toastmaster Matthew. Would you confirm your position? Would you like to be the affirmative or the opponent?
I will be the affirmative.
Okay, sounds good. Yes.
I think it's actually when the topic is set,
Question is
then the first speaker can choose. They hear the topic and then they can choose in their mind, oh, I'll be the affirmative or the opposer. So it's after they hear it. Yeah.
That's how I understand it.
That's right. I don't think you have to exclusively say what side you're taking. It's just with your argument that you would present.
Okay. Sounds good. So, Matthew, you're up first. I am going to start with the questions so that Sounds good. So, Matthew, you're up first. I am going to start with the questions so that we can begin. The question is, prisoners should be allowed to vote. Prisoners should be allowed to vote. Begin.
I believe right up front that prisoners should be allowed to vote. If we use the blanket statement as all prisoners should be denied the right to vote, we have not considered perhaps what their convictions have been for. I don't know that as someone who had a minor infraction should be denied the civil liberty of being able to vote should be put on the same level as someone who is perhaps on death row for murder. Best case scenario is to allow everyone to vote as their duty. It goes a long way towards saying that we value people's opinions and their right to express what we have been given from the very first days of our country's history. I believe that they would respond in a way that is healthy for us. I don't believe that the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of voters being denied the right to vote is that which leads us to being a better country. I believe that giving them the right to vote is the way to go.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for those wonderful thoughts. And that is a great philosophical way of looking at this topic. But I'd like to point out the logistical and infrastructure issues with regard to allowing prisoners to vote. Theoretically, sitting in the prison cell, yes, you have the human right to vote. But imagine the infrastructure, logistical nightmare that is associated with allowing someone who's incarcerated to be let out into the polling booth in order to vote. Now, I do concede that you might be able to suggest an electronic voting system, but we are not at American Idol yet. We are speaking about prisoners incarcerated falsely or accurately for a small or big infraction, and they are in one location for a specified and required reason. Whether philosophically, morally, and spiritually, it might be considered right to allow them to vote. But my contention is, having that release, having to take them to a secure location with a mode of secure transport, it just simply does not bear the merit that the philosophical argument has. So my contention is that prisoners should not be allowed to vote. Over to you.
That is a very valid argument, and one of which should be considered at all points of what you have suggested. I believe that in a given situation wherein you and I were allowed to sit down at a table, and though we are on opposing sides of the issue, to be able to work this out. Again, this is a philosophical argument. The logistical part of it, I believe in a country that we live in today is well able to overcome anything that may be logistical, that may stand in our way of approaching this problem. But I believe that, once again, not only in a philosophical, but on an ethical and moral stand, we should allow those who are prisoners to vote. After all, they are human beings with feelings and should not have those rights taken away simply because they have been incarcerated.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And I would like to point out that as part of WISE, our mandate is universal and global, but not necessarily contained to the region. So although I do concede that yes, in a certain country it might be possible, but when we take the over 170 countries in this world that we populate, it will be a difficult situation. And when we look at it in terms of its implementation in our lifetime, I do not see that happening. And even the payoff beyond that is going to be dangerous and uncontrollable. Think of the mafia dons who plan on funerals and attendance at funerals simply so that they can commit more crimes. Especially when you speak about a death row inmate or hardcore professional criminals, they will misuse and abuse this. This is not fiction, it is fact. And it is not a figment of my imagination, but it has been the subject of many, many, many research and writings. So although humanly, for a traffic violation also, if you are stuck, there may be a situation where it may be you can vote later. But if you are incarcerated, it is for the simple fact that you have committed an infraction. And in a small or big way, there has been a breaking of the law. Two rights, or in order to give them the right to vote, the effort that the government and the authorities have to exercise is simply immeasurable. Over to you.
Very valid points that you would make. I would simply suggest that these are not insurmountable. I believe that the point that you brought up of looking at over 170 countries is a very good point to make. There are many countries throughout the world to where those who are incarcerated simply because it is the will of the state and not due to a crime. These things happen in our country as well. And I believe that there are ways that we can secure the correct way of voting.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And while I do agree that voting is a fundamental right, I do believe that someone incarcerated has done something little or big to damage and dent that fundamental right that has been given. And imagine a situation where you have organized criminals in not hundreds, not thousands, but in millions in prisons all across the world. Imagine a situation where organized criminals now organize themselves into criminal voting. That would take place much faster than the government could ever think of having a free and fair election for all that is concerned. The last thing that we would need is for a criminal warlord to be voted in by the population that is being incarcerated and then coming to power, putting in legislation that will absolutely act for the detriment of society at large. And this we know for a fact because prisoners, hardcore prisoners incarcerated for a long period of time have just one thought in mind. How do I get back at the society that put me behind these iron bars? As sad as it may be, the probability of someone incarcerated for a small crime voting well is far outweighed by the factual probability of an organized criminal who is under the protection of the criminal organization within these bars, misusing and abusing this right that is given to them for small mercies that may be afforded to them within the prison walls. It is not a matter of if, but when.
Again, very good points, and I commend you for bringing these up. However, I would like to point out that in our society, there are issues that are not insurmountable, though many people are adversarial on a whole host of issues. I believe that in the best case scenario, that when we put people behind bars, they used to be called correctional facilities. Is that a fallacy? Some believe yes. I believe that the correctional facility really is the mode that should be happening there. That we need to educate and bring them to a point to where they feel that they can be a productive member of society through education, through training, and through putting our best foot forward. And I believe that great minds like you and I and many who are in this room are able to come up with a good plan and a workable plan.
Thank you for those erudite comments, Matthew. And my contention to that is, just because something is doable, it does not mean that we go out there and do it. There are issues, burning matters that would be better served by the transfer of the government's thoughts, deeds, minds, and resources. And on the list of priorities, even though this may not be insurmountable, but the amount of time and effort and money and energy and resources that has to be brought to bear to solve this particular issue would really not serve the better benefit of society and humanity at large. Providing the vote for someone who does not have access to transport, logistics, electronics might be a better option rather than trying to provide someone who has demonstrably, provably, judicially been convicted and incarcerated of a crime or an infraction which is not in line with the expectations of society. On the balance of probability, on the balance of possibility, on the availability of resources which are all limited and focused on an unlimited set of demands, it is my firm belief that we are better served pointing our attentions in a more well-deserved direction, even though this particular issue of giving them the vote is not insurmountable. Just because it is insurmountable, it does not mean we should focus our attention on it. There are burning issues that would serve much better of the government's attention.
Thank you so much to both participants. That was excellent. Awesome. And right before we go to the other participants, Madam Timer, are you there? Madam Timer?
Yes, I
I
am.
just wanted to ensure that you are actually following the timing in accordance to the time card for the 3 rounds.